Ladies and gentlemen, what's up? I know I have been absent, very busy, very, very busy. As you know, I have a company. So, anyways, tonight we have a special guest. It is Ron Matten of Yonkers. As many know, Ron Matten has been around. So, Ron, how are you?
Good, Anderson. Good to meet you and see you.
Likewise. So, as before we went on, I thank you for coming on here, and your prompt response to me asking you to come on. 'Cause we do have a few things to talk about. I do want to talk about the future of Yonkers politics, and a little more than that. So, Ron, it's going to be an interesting. Well, it's already begun. It's interesting political year in Yonkers, right?
Yeah, we've gotten through the petition process. A few candidates, I understand, haven't made it, or haven't made it on all the lines that they've attempted to. I believe that Carzon Pineda Isaacs has lost the um, Working Families Party line. I don't know if there'll be a challenge on that. And I hear Peter Spano is off of the Democratic ticket for District 5. And let's see. I know there's a little controversy with Nick Speranza, who has just about every line between him and the Democrats at this point. Nick,
Absolutely.
the judge.
So, there's quite a few interesting characters running for mayor this year. So we have from both parties, obviously the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, before we go into that, I want to know, and I'm sure a lot of people want to know your opinion on term extension. What's your opinion on how this was conducted this time? Uh, beside frig, it slipped out. How do you think this time it was conducted compared to the last time it was
So
2 4 years ago?
I'm going to give you a little my background on this. I'd become more active in the Republican Party around 2016. 2018 rolled around. The ward leaders had asked the district leaders to come up and speak in support of 4 more years for Mayor Spano. At the time, I rationalized that we were in pretty dire financial straits in 2018. The mayor had built a relationship with then Governor Cuomo. If you recall, we had just come off of that funding debacle with Yonkers Public Schools, where they misbooked about $53 million in grant revenue. And we needed a couple of handouts a few years prior to get through that. And then we also needed some handouts to get through the raises that were needed for the new contracts. So I incorrectly, or I tried to rationalize that the mayor deserved another 4 years because he had this relationship with the governor. That was an error on my part. There was a referendum. There were two referendums. The former mayors, particularly Spencer, had wanted to run again, had rationalized running again, but wouldn't do it on a council vote the way the current mayor has. So
Let me ask you. I'm sorry to cut you off real quick. Do you feel like you were probably targeted after that change of mind?
I will, but I'll the change of mind. Look, I anticipated that there'd be another 4 years in March, when the mayor wasn't going to run for Congress, because at one point he was, or the rumor was, I don't know, he didn't confide anything in me, but the rumor was that he was interested in challenging Jamal Bowman for Congress, and he had that vote on Phil Reisman's radio show, which may or may not have been taken out of context, but that made it more difficult for him to run. So I'm not sure there was anything left in politics. And really, I'm going to say that the Spano administration has a pretty strong hold on the city at this point. 5 of the 7 councilmen are are in the are in the mayor's camp, we'll call it, and will basically at least 4 of those 5 will vote um, uh, for whatever the mayor puts in front of them. I think that's the real difference between this administration and other administrations. We had political discourse between the council and the mayor's office, which is good because I think that works for the people. So yeah, my change of I kind of thought this was coming. I couldn't say I knew this was coming with any certainty. I knew it was a possibility. And when we got past August and this was starting to, there were little signs coming out of Yonkers Times. There were little polls coming out. It became more evident that there would be a seeking of a fourth term. And as you recall, Mike Breen on Rue Ross's Yonkers Voice was running for assembly, and he came out categorically against extending the term limits because he was running for assembly and he didn't want to look like he had a backup plan. I don't know what he really thought about that, whether he was lying to us then or he's lying to us now. But he voted, he was the deciding vote, and he was also voting in his interest.
So I want to talk about you and Breen. That's definitely a subject. So term limits was really the way it was handled this time was crazy. Now with term limits, and now there's a lawsuit, so we don't know if the mayor is actually going to be running, right? Be able to run.
So the lawsuit is carried on long enough that I think that will. It's not going to come to a satisfactory conclusion for us who are on the lawsuit, because the mayor's got his signatures already. The mayor's on the ballot. Other people are on the ballot, and I don't think you're going to find a judge at this point who's going to say, "Look, we're going to change this," just weeks before a primary, and then have to do a special election, much like was done with the assembly in the redistricting. So, well, not with the assembly.
People are going to react to that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So I think the slate of candidates that we currently have, Margaret Coleman, Corazon Pineda-Isaac, Anthony Moranti, and Mayor Spano will carry to the end. Will at least carry until this primary. I don't know what's going to happen on the Democratic side.
It's pretty weird that these are politicians that have voted before to extend the term limits, have backed up the mayor for so long, and now you have two or three council of his own council members running against him now. One councilwoman's trying to leave.
You have Margaret Coleman isn't currently on the council, or wasn't on the council, but
you have what are their names? You have Corazon, who was just dropped by the working parties.
Well, she wasn't dropped by the Working Families Party. To be clear, her petitions were challenged, and that's a tactic that's used. It's a legal tactic. They put up a straw candidate, Allison Abramson. She got about 48 signatures on her petition. Pardon me if I look a little off. My camera's not centered, but I'm much more relaxed when I look at you because I'm talking. So I'm going to try not talking to the camera and talking to you.
It's all good.
So Corazon was not removed. The Working Families Party is still endorsing her. They still want her as a candidate, but unfortunately, to be a Working Family Party candidate, you only need to get 23 signatures, 23 valid, good signatures. Corazon got 27 signatures. So apparently there were 5 or more signatures that were not valid.
Okay. Gotcha.
Allison Abramson, who I've never heard of before this. She's a 26-year-old living over here in Northeast Yonkers. She got 48 signatures, so she survived any challenges.
Okay. Now, how about Morante? Morante was a huge Spano supporter before. Well, what has happened between them?
I'm not going to say that Morante was a huge Spano supporter before. I think Morante voted his conscience. He's a CPA. He voted for some initiatives that he felt were appropriate, and he's voted against others. I mean, he's voted against a few tax hikes. There was one tax hike, a very large tax hike, that I believe Anthony voted for, as well as Mike Breen. I'm trying to remember whether John Rubo was still I think John was still a Republican at the time, but it was a 6%. It was a huge tax increase. It was a 6% tax increase. And the governor had given Yonkers a chunk of funds and said, look, I will cure your debts with this money, but you have to make up the rest of your own, and you can't lay anybody off. Right. So they really had no choice. They had a choice. I mean, it could have been a 4-3.
Yeah, a tight choice.
Well, it could have been a 4-3 vote, but that was one of the tax increases that Anthony had voted for. The other things that Anthony's done really a good job on the council is he's found anomalies within the budget. So places where they've booked money into places where it shouldn't have been booked. And that's, being a certified public accountant, you tend to gather an eye for that. So Anthony has worked to save us money. He's not totally been on board with Mike Spano, but at the same point is, you don't prove your worth by always being against the administration either. You got to find the things you can agree on, find the things you can compromise on, because not everybody gets their way. And sometimes you have to give in, and sometimes they have to give in.
Got it.
You need to move the city forward.
Right. So, with that being said, and you mentioned Breen earlier, there's been some reported tension between Breen and you. Breen, you guys were running against each other once before. So this time Breen is apparently going after everybody. What do you think his intentions are?
Well, so this goes a little bit back to a schism within the Republican Party. So, when Mike Spano was a Republican, the party was fairly well united. And that was, united around Nick, his brother.
People say Nick's the real mayor of Yonkers.
Well, I don't sit in I don't sit in the Spano living room, so I couldn't tell you who's running the city. I do know that Nick is influential. He's still influential within the Republican Party, and that's where the schism kind of comes in, because there are rank and file Republicans who feel, all right, Nick and Mike went to Nader Sage's fundraiser, endorsed Nader Sage, a Democrat. Nick and Mike are largely responsible for Lakeisha Collins Bellamy being on the council. And then there are those in the party that still have an allegiance to Nick and Mike because they feel at heart they're still Republicans. My feeling is if they were still Republicans, they would be Republicans coming to events and supporting Republican candidates. Mike Breen owes his allegiance to the Spanos. He can't win an election without them. He ran without their consent against Nader Sage. It was a close race. I won't say it was a complete blowout. Mike did okay, but still he didn't win. And he didn't win within his own district. Within his own council district, people voted for Nader Sage more than they voted for Mike Breen. So that has to be somewhat telling. I like Mike as a person. I mean, Mike is the kind of councilman or the kind of person you want to sit down and have a beer with. He's funny, he's personable, but I also feel that he doesn't have the best interest of Yonkers, and he doesn't have the best interest of the party.
You saying that? Two questions. Recently posted a video, probably a month or two ago. It was an interview with Rue that Mike Breen had. Very hypocritical video, and I kind of called them out on it. and I have called his office and no success, of course. So he was telling Rue, hey, it's time to, take the old blood out, bring in the young blood in. Isn't that kind of hypocritical, considering he would be considered an old blood? Not by age, obviously. I'm saying by the amount of time he has spent in City Hall.
Well, so Mike was trying to, again, Mike was running for assembly when he sat down with Rue, and he came out and he said, I believe in term limits. We all should have term limits. Congress should have term limits. The president is term limited. Those were almost his exact words. And then he said, people are 80 years old serving in Congress. They're old dogs. I'm going to be an old dog soon. That's slightly paraphrased. And then he used almost the exact opposite words to support his vote when he said, we don't have term limits in Congress. We don't have term limits in the Senate.
That's what I'm saying. It's hypocritical.
Absolutely hypocritical. And, most regular average folks in Yonkers go about their business. They see somebody they vote for them because they're affable. They're a nice guy. They feel they have their interests at heart. And I've learned in my time that's not exactly Mike Breen. It's not always our interest that he has at heart. Mike Breen has Mike Breen's interest at heart. And that, look, people are saying that I'm bucking the party and I'm going against the party. I put country first, party second. So it's my principles are more important than what I feel is good. I do agree that we're overdeveloping. I do think it's great that we've got some developments going, but when we build a 41-story tower at Vanderdunk Bark in Larkin Plaza, that's a giant middle finger that's sticking up. It doesn't belong there. It's out of place in the skyline. We don't have the infrastructure for all of this development. Look at what happened. Yeah, look at what happened with Ida. So when we do all of this impermeable surfaces that the water can't get through, we have flooding. So we've replaced folks in the building department. We've replaced folks on boards, and they don't necessarily have the qualifications to be on those boards or to be in those positions. And those are my concerns.
And besides the whole flooding issue and the space and everything else that you mentioned, which are very good points, I've been really big on the affordable housing part of that.
I'm going to give you my impression on affordable housing, and it's probably going to differ. It's probably going to be closer to Mayor Spanos on that, is because I feel we're in competition with New Rochelle. We're in competition with White Plains. We're in competition with Mount Vernon. And when you give a developer an opportunity to build here and you give them some incentives, if the incentives aren't as good as what they're getting in White Plains or in New Rochelle, they're going to go there because they can make more money.
Give me a few examples of those incentives.
So we have pilots, payments in lieu of taxes. So they make a payment, we don't get taxes for a number of years. And depending on what they pay is what they develop here. So if our disincentives to build, which is by saying, okay, we're going to be at 20% affordable housing, and they can build 13 in New Rochelle, they're going to go build 13 in New Rochelle because they can get market rate pricing on 7.
But what's the need to have all the developments if it's not really for the people that live in Yonkers?
So there is a need to have, and this is the lack of planning. So, we started this construction. We didn't think about what people are going to be displaced. The other problem is all of these Westchester cities didn't work with each other. This is on the county level. The county should have done a little bit of coordination. White Plains got built up much quicker than Yonkers did. Those folks from White Plains came down here to Yonkers. And I'm not saying, hey, you don't live here, don't come here. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm saying,
I get what you mean, yeah.
You're causing an exodus because you've built these luxury high rises, and now
no one can afford.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, even affordable housing, the aim on affordable housing, it's too high. Okay, I make a pretty good living. wouldn't want to live in a $2,000 a month apartment and having my money go out.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
should really be looking at some forms of ownership for folks. My parents moved into Valentine Gardens, which at the time was a Mitchell-Lama co-op. They were able to buy their apartment in 1975, I think, for $16,000. Well, that's 1975.
I'm
Um,
jealous.
yeah, but that never that those co-ops never went to market rate. When my parents passed, and I sold their co-op, it was a nice two-bedroom on a top floor, which was probably, I think I sold it in 2012, and we sold it for 108. And if you would have bought a market rate co-op somewhere else, uh, just like a few blocks away into Riverdale, that would have been 140, $150,000 co-op. Plus, the maintenance was extremely low. I think my parents' maintenance when I sold it was around $700 for a two-bedroom apartment on a top floor.
That's wild.
Well, and that was something that was built in the 50s. It was built in the 50s to attract working class folks into Yonkers. We moved in. There were a few people who owned some stores, but they were all working class.
You had the Domino Sugar Factory. You had the Carpet Factory. You had a few
Well,
places.
yeah. Well, that Yonkers has this rich history of actually being pretty good for housing until we got into this probably the mid to late 50s and 60s. Um, Yonkers had the first integrated municipal housing in the United States. I think it's in the United States. I did a paper. I did a paper on the Yonkers DSEG case as my capstone for my master's in public administration, and it really kind of traced how we got to the DSEG point. And all of the municipal housing was built on the west side to support
All
Domino
right.
Sugar, to support the carpet factories, and all of these great Otis Elevator,
Yeah, oh, it is. Yeah.
all these great industrial businesses that we had here. But what happened is people started to move upward. They moved out of the west side into the east side. Um, Earlier than that, though, these were built to support the industry in Yonkers, and again, it was integrated. They had rules in some of these that um, you had to be of good character, and all of these kind
Right.
of rules. Um, but I can imagine it was a fairly decent place to live. When we packed everybody with low income into one side of the city and did not provide services to that side of the city is when we started to see urban blight here in Yonkers. So it is our fault the way we administered government in the 60s, how we got to that DSEG, and we had good schools on the east side and we had crummy schools on the west side.
Right.
It was a lack of investment.
The school system is still struggling. We can come to that. A lot of people are very happy with the exit of Quesada now.
Yeah, I'm suspect of the statistics that are used to support the graduation rates. I don't think the statistics are valid until you get into
They're
regents.
absolutely not.
Right.
No, there's no way possible.
Until you get to regents exams, I don't think it's. I'm suspect that these are valid graduation rates, or that we're actually graduating people that deserve to graduate.
Right.
And
Right.
it's nothing. If you went to a school and you weren't taught, it's not on the student. Um, there's been a lot of technological advancements within education since 2012, where I worked previously. I worked at the Greenwich Public School System. I was their director of facilities, and we instituted almost an individualized learning program for each student there. Every student from K, and this, granted, Greenwich is a wealthier, different demographic.
Not as big.
It's not as big. Greenwich has about 9,000 students. I had 14 schools totaling about 1 million square feet. I'm sorry, 15 schools, including the high school, totaling about everything totaled about 1 million square feet. Yonkers has somewhere in the neighborhood of 26,000, 27,000 students.
Yeah.
So three times greater. But that doesn't mean you can't. So, when people talk about getting rid of busing and we're on a mandate, that doesn't really mean that, if you were to take the city and divide it into 3 sections and just make sure that the sections were well distributed in terms of diversity, you could run 3 separate school systems a little more efficiently than
Right.
you can run the one large school. It's an unwieldy school system, and nothing against our teachers. They deserve what they get, but we do have the highest teachers when they're paid. When they're getting on that step program and they're getting up there, it's a very high pay. We spend about $23,000 per student, while in New Rochelle, they spend about $28,000 per student, and in White Plains, they spend about $33,000 per student. We pay more than those other 2 municipalities pay.
At
So,
one point, Yonkers Fire Department, I'm not sure that, well, I'm sure it has changed. They were the highest paid firefighters in the country.
well, Yonkers has, outside of New York City, Yonkers has the highest municipal budget in the state when it comes to overtime. And there are ways to fairly manage overtime within a municipal budget that we really don't institute here. Some of this,
It's been an issue for decades, not
yeah.
years, decades.
If you're familiar with what New York City used to have, they called their CompStat, which has now become
Yeah.
predictive policing. Well, there are municipalities that do that with respect to their overtime, with respect to their outage, their sick time, lost time. The department heads get together on a weekly basis, and they're required to report where they're
Track
over.
numbers.
Right, and so there's a deputy mayor who's responsible for making sure that the departments perform efficiently. And if they're not, it's not that anybody gets fired; it's that you get some resources to manage that better.
It's
And
simple. It's like for those who don't understand it that technically, it's like at McDonald's. If you run a McDonald's, you're expected to keep a certain number of at a profit or whatever. I guess
right,
I never
well,
worked at McDonald's, but it's kind of
yeah,
an example. You
but
know,
so Baltimore has this in effect. It's called City Stat, and the department heads meet, and even things like, I don't know that we have a work order system in Yonkers, where I'm a constituent. I say I got a pothole. I put a work order in, and I don't know where that goes. We should have a system where if I put a work order in because I have a pothole, I can look at where that is in the queue. The problem with
gotcha.
the way the city manages this now, if I'm a council person and I need something done for one of my constituents, I have to go to Michael Sabatino at Constituent Services, and then the administration gets to decide who gets those resources. So the problem is, if I'm Tasha Diaz or I'm Mike Breen, who vote for term limits for the mayor, I get my services. If I'm Anthony Moranti or Curzon Pineda Isaacs, who vote against it, and I'm running against them in election, well, let's withhold those services so Anthony Moranti and Corazon can't deliver for their
Got
constituents.
it.
They look bad.
Right. So you know, perfect that you bring that up because I do want to touch this subject. Okay, so with Breen is what is his role in the Republican Party to be exact for those who don't
I'm
know?
sorry, can you restate that?
What is Breen's exact role in the Republican Party for those
So
who
Mike
don't know?
Mike Breen is the 11th ward leader. So we have a ward system here. There are 12 wards. Not all of the Republican wards are duly constituted. I live in the 5th ward. Mike Breen's district, the 5th council district, is made up largely of areas within the 5th and 11th ward, has a little bit of the 9th ward in it. So Mike Breen controls pretty much the votes in the 11th ward. So when we pick a candidate and you say, well, look, I'm gonna run against Mike Breen and I want the party support. Well, Mike already controls half of those votes because he controls the 11th ward.
So I'm asking, and I think you know why I'm asking. There was talk that Breen played role in removing you from the Republican Party.
Right. So not removing me from the Republican Party, but removing me from the 5th District and moving. I live in election district 5-8. So I don't know directly that Mike Breen had a role in that, but I do hear that he had a role in that. So I'm going to say an alleged role that I was removed. I did make enough of a stink about it. I was put back in. I was going to challenge Mike, and I thought I have a better role to play in trying to fix term limits and not muddying that up. Ron Chute, who lives also in the 5th Council District and 5th Ward. Is he in the 5th Ward? Yeah, he's still in the 5th Ward. He said he would be willing to run. Ron is an excellent candidate. He's involved with the Knights of Columbus. He's involved with his church. He's involved with youth sports, the Hillcrest Lakers. He's raised a family here. He's the president of All Hallows High School, which is a urban high school in the Bronx. So I think he's a fantastic candidate who's true to his principles, and I can play a role in the back, making, working, helping to get Anthony elected, helping to get Ron elected, and also helping to get our term limits referendum on. So we're still going to be out. We're going to be out next week getting signatures for our referendum. We're establishing a new independent party within Yonkers. It's called Restore Term Limits. We're trying to get candidates on that party if they want to run. So even though the petition process is over for the major parties, we're doing an independent petition process to try to get candidates who are committed to restoring term limits.
Gotcha. So, let's go a little back. So this incident happened, call it an incident. You were put back on. So there was a lot of people, and I don't usually, but I know that he is most likely watching this. So I want to ask you, we have obviously like I said at the beginning, we have quite a few interesting characters running for office this year, right?
Yeah.
And I say interesting, I emphasize on interesting. So we have Freddie Vasquez who's running for mayor.
Yeah, I don't know that Freddie got
I don't know or not, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know that Freddie got his signatures in. When I got the petition logs, I didn't see Freddie's name on it.
So do you think that was probably a stunt?
I'm not sure that was a stunt. Look, I know Freddie. Freddie and I at times have our differences. Freddie and I at times are aligned. I like Freddie. I think he tries to do the right thing. I think he earnestly wanted to run as mayor because he didn't feel that he could support any of the other candidates because they were formerly on the council. I don't think Freddie actually knew the work involved in going out and getting those signatures. Last time I ran, I ran for council president, and I had to get I think 700 signatures. Because of COVID, they reduced it by 30%. And I was able to get 100 signatures on my own, but that was a lot of work. That was several weeks of being out there knocking door to door, particularly up here. Freddie doesn't live too far from me over here. It's not like an apartment building where you can knock on 10 doors. You go to an area like Beach Hill, which is great. I get my steps in. I still need to lose a little more weight, so I don't mind this process. But it's a lot of work. You just can't stand outside a supermarket and think you're going to get good signatures because the people aren't vetted. They come out. I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're really a candidate. And most of those signatures get thrown out.
So, I ask, and I only mention him. It's not about him. It's about you. And the reason I bring it up is because everyone was saying that the incident with you originally not being removed, let's not use that word, but the incident where you had to be reinstated into the Republican Party had to do with your possible friendship or affiliation with Freddie Vasquez.
No. So it has nothing. So I wasn't removed from the Republican Party. I'm still a Republican. I'm a registered Republican. I stepped down from leadership, and I'll tell you why I stepped down from leadership. I got a call from somebody at City Hall at the end of December, before the districting maps came out, and I was told, hey, you're going to be removed. You know, they don't want you to run against Mike. You're going to be removed for the district. You're going to be put in the 6th council. And that wasn't a terrible thing either. Look, I'm working to get Anthony elected. I could have stayed in the 6th council district and said, Anthony, let's get you elected, and you can appoint me as your replacement. But I like where I am. I like being in the 5th council district, and you know, depending on what happens with Ron, I may run in 4 years. I don't know. But I felt I could better work with the referendum. I felt that was more important. I also looked at the council, and look, Shanae voted against the term limits, but they didn't need her vote. I guarantee you, if Mike Breen had voted against term limits, Shanae would have voted for it, because they needed the 4 votes. And look at how much work they're doing for Shanae right now against Chris Johnson. Just a week and a half ago, Nick Spano had a fundraiser at his house for Shanae. So
she did once vote for term extension, the first go ahead.
She did. I will say the most consistent person with term limits has been Carzone Pineda Isaacs. She didn't vote for it before.
She didn't do it this time.
She didn't vote for it this time. She is being criticized because she's serving. She did run for the 3rd term, but she didn't vote for it. So I give her credit for being consistent. Mike Cater last time didn't vote for it. Those were the 2 votes. This time there were 3 votes.
We didn't talk about Rubo. You mentioned him earlier. Are you well, you probably know, obviously, ahead of anyone else, but a lot of people are surprised he hasn't announced a run for mayor.
No, so and again, I'm going to speak a little bit in rumor because I don't know it firsthand. So this is what has been said to me, and it can only be alleged. I understand that some folks from the Democratic Party sat down with John a few years ago and said, hey, look, if you switch parties, we'll make you majority leader, and then we'll eventually make you mayor when Mike moves on. Well, that was a broken promise at this point, because there's a 4th term, potential 4th term. I also heard, I have no proof of this, I heard that he was offered deputy mayor. So if Mike Spano decides to move on or run, Mike Spano has filed a campaign committee for county executive, which is election in 2 years. So if Mike were to move on, the order of succession is the first deputy mayor. And if the first deputy mayor doesn't take it, then the city council president gets it. Second deputy mayor, which we have, is not listed in the charter. So that's not in the order of succession. So if John were to be made first deputy mayor, he'd be in that order of succession. I understand that might be being pulled off the table. John had a lawsuit. I think it was settled out of court regarding pay to unpaid wages. And he also took out PPP loans. And I don't know. I've been told, again, don't know, and I want to call it a rumor. I don't want to call it substantiated, that perhaps the number of employees didn't line up, and particularly this lawsuit made things a little more difficult, and maybe with the bad press that John may not be in line for that deputy mayor spot. But again,
especially with his affiliation with AMS.
Well, I've always felt that was suspect. I'm using quotes now, the ethics board, because the ethics board at one point didn't even have enough members to constitute a quorum. The ethics board met and said that, yeah, John can be in charge of the real estate committee. I don't see that as a valid ruling, if you will.
That was a bad idea overall.
Well, AMX is the major developer right now in Yonkers.
Exactly.
You have Joe Cotter with respect to the movie studios Great Point Studios and their tenant, um, Lionsgate. So that is also a major developer, but AMS is the major residential real estate developer in the city right now. So I think there is a conflict of interest if you are renting your space. And if it's not a conflict of interest, why don't you put your lease out there? Show us what you're paying. Remember,
Right.
I wrote an article 2 years ago calling for the city council to investigate Mike Cater because it was an allegation. I did not say that Mike Cater was guilty. I did not say that Mike Cater did anything wrong. I said if these allegations are true, then there's a problem. Same thing with John. I'm not saying John's doing anything wrong, and I'm not saying John's doing anything wrong by being chair of the real estate committee. But maybe there needs to be a little more transparency in that.
Why isn't Cater running for mayor this year?
I don't know. Since Mike is suing me for $1 million based on my article, I don't think that we don't talk much these days. But I do like Mike, and I will say this: I wrote the article. Nobody told me to write that article. Lakeisha had written an article a week earlier regarding Karen. HR controversy in his office. I was not so concerned with that, but I felt that this other piece should be investigated. So I did a follow-up article. As I've been around, look, I've been attacked mercilessly by Mo and Larry. I'm not saying the other bloggers because I don't want to put you in that group.
I know what you mean. I know.
But, yeah. So those other two guys in their little extortion scheme have attacked me, and mostly because I like to speak the truth. So I can see how Mike may have been set up a little bit in all of this. And look, if he didn't, so there's one thing is I'm renting from somebody, and I also have a business relationship, and maybe it's a tough time, and I don't pay rent. I do pay rent. I don't know if he did. He didn't. I didn't see any evidence. Again,
Like you said, if you're actually paying something, just show how much you're paying.
Show the lease. Show that you've got. So if John wanted to be fully transparent, he can say, look, I got a year of checks here, or this is my lease with AMS. I'm fully up, or look, during COVID they cut me a break on 3 months. If they cut him a break, then I would say, look, I think you have to recuse yourself from any real estate votes.
True, very true.
I think you do it. Look, I work in a business where it's kind of easy to look for kickbacks, and I don't even go out for lunch with contractors because I just don't feel comfortable being in that. Even if I'm paying for my own meal, I don't feel comfortable being in that situation because I'm not losing my job over 20.
Don't want to be misinterpreted, especially nowadays. It's very easy for someone to do that. So, what do you see? What do you see this year ending? How do you see this year ending with politics?
So with Carzone, I don't know. Carzone may have a court challenge to get back on. I don't know if she does. I hear
you think she has a chance?
Well, I feel so. Look, Tim Iadoni came out and supported her. He came out and endorsed her. I've heard that she's got some heavy Democrats behind her that may not have come out yet. I think she's got a pretty good chance. I hear she has a good war chest of funds. She's got a lot of people behind her, even though she may be off the working families party line. They're still endorsing her as their candidate. So she's got a lot of people working for her, and she's got a lot of people behind her. So I think she's probably at this point in time. I wouldn't have said this 3 months ago. I think she's got the best shot of a Democrat to defeat the incumbent. That's not a lock. That's not a lock because the mayor controls a lot of votes. When I ran, I lost. I lost by about 1,100 votes. I went the next weekend to the diner, and two guys from 456 DPW said, "Hey, we voted for you. We got a call the day before to vote for Lakeisha." So it wasn't the union; it was management within the DPW called them up and said, look, you got to go vote for Lakeisha. So
a lot of people are saying about talking about this. That's why city employees show up to city hall meetings, and especially the
sure.
term extension and all that, because they're being called by their supervisors to show up to these events, to vote, like you just said, to do fundraising events.
Right, it's very transparent. If you look, I went to pay my bill at Dunwoody. When I had my event 2 years ago, it was I guess sometime in September, and the mayor had a golf outing that evening at Dunwoody, and all of City Hall was there at about 1:00 in the afternoon, setting up Dunwoody Golf Course. Now, I don't know, they could have all taken a personal day, but then I don't know who's running City Hall. So, and some of it is the power of the incumbent. That's why term limits are important, because I do think Anthony's got a good shot too. If you look at Ed Koch couldn't survive after 3 terms. If you look at Rob Astorino didn't survive after 3 terms. If you look at Andy O'Rourke didn't survive after 3 terms. Mario
They
Cuomo
also didn't have their whole family in City Hall, though.
Yeah, look,
this is not a shot to anybody.
No, I
seriously.
They
not a shot to anybody, but
all of the candidates that I mentioned also didn't have 15 siblings. Look, I have a lot of respect for how well the Spano family runs as a machine.
That's my point. I have respect to that aspect, but
I'm sorry, you cut out just a bit. I didn't get the last.
I said I respect it too, and that's my point, but nepotism.
Right. Well, there is, and look, I'm not here to bash them either. I think, we're in a better spot than we were several years ago, but there are
100%.
There's other factors involved in that. We got COVID funding. COVID funding goes away. I think we have $195 million in the reserve funds now. We've never had that before. The schools are a little better than they've been. They're not great. They're a little.
We haven't been building much.
Well, we built 1 school. We can't afford to.
In 11 years that since Spano was elected, 11 years, 1 school.
Right. So I was on the Yonkers Joint School Construction Board. Breen appointed me. I got a letter saying that Breen has taken me off. I don't believe he has that authority. I've kicked that up to the New York State, Investigator General, IG, for her to opine, because I'm afraid that making this board political is going to affect our reimbursement from New York State. So this school we're building is about $80 million. We're, of course, bonding a lot of it, and we're going to get about 70% reimbursement from the state. But, we don't have that kind of money that we can just, keep building schools.
Well, no, I can agree to that. That's common sense. But when I say 1 school, it's still 1 school. There's no,
I know.
There's no going around that.
It's a large school. I personally, I felt the footprint was a little too big. And I know that, the mayor wanted to get a big school because he felt he wasn't going to get another bite at the apple within his term. But yeah, no, we certainly have to put money in. Part of it is we have a lot of deferred maintenance. Much of our schools are not suitable anymore.
What about the firehouses? The fire department is behind 5 fire companies right now.
Yeah, I do think we need. So I think we need an additional firehouse. That was promised when we did Ridge Hill. I get what the administration kind of says is that these are largely fireproof buildings because they're concrete and they have sprinklers, and
it's not always about that. It's call volume,
Yeah, sure. It's response time, and as the city builds up, and I go to City Hall, and when I get on Yonkers Avenue, and try to get down there to get to City Hall,
it's discouraging.
Right. That's I feel like I'm on my way to Manhattan. So yeah, I get it. It's placement. When I worked for Greenwich, it was the same thing. there was a big push for a firehouse in Greenwich, which is much better funded than Yonkers.
They're greater funded, but they're also a combination department. I used to be a firefighter, so I know a lot about Greenwich. They're
Right.
a combination being paid
Right.
and volunteer.
Volunteers and professional firefighters. They're all professional firefighters, but
Oh yeah, I get what you mean.
let's
Yeah.
call it unpaid.
Right.
So, but they were also, there's a lot of space in what they call backcountry in Greenwich. So they were trying to get because response times were a little higher to what they call backcountry, and even as well funded as Greenwich is, they couldn't pull that over the line.
Right.
Because you're also adding bodies on, because you've got to provide people to man that equipment.
Right.
And it's not just manning the equipment 8 hours and going home. It's a 24/7 shift.
Right. So, before we're way past time, but it's great conversation. Before we end this, what do you see Ron Matten doing?
Well, I'm going to be around. I'll be, as I tell my wife, I've been kicking over beehives the last couple of months. And look, when I see things that aren't right, I'm going to try to tactfully do it. Occasionally, I will try to do it with a little bit of levity, like the retire Breen. One fellow Republican named my truck the Mean Green Anti-Breen Machine. So I'll be out there with that at events, and if I find something else that I'm going to call it a gimmick, but if I can find something else as a gimmick to bring attention to when we have people who are acting in their interests and not our interests, I'm going to be there to call that out. And
Absolutely,
that's my job right now, to call out that we have a council, not just Mike Breen. Tasha Diaz is not acting in our interest either. Lakeisha Collins Bellamy is not acting in our interest either. And sometimes I like Shanae. I think she's the nicest person on the council. But, sometimes she's not always acting in our interest. And I think the attacks on Chris Johnson are a little unfair at this point without having all the information.
Well, did you see the video? I did.
So somebody had sent me the video, and I was at work. I was walking through. I work at a medical college. We have a dental school, and I'm walking through the dental school, and I put it on, and I had to turn it off very quickly with some of the language on the video. I didn't see the whole look.
I think it's an opportunist moment.
Right, it is. It's despicable what happened. I think before we politicize this, let's find out what happened. Let's find out why the Board of Legislators. I know there's a call for Kathleen Borger to leave, to step down. That might be the right call at this point. And why the county police didn't do this investigation any quicker, I think that's a problem too. But to call out Chris Johnson as a majority leader when you don't know what he knew, the Board of Legislators doesn't operate the same way that the council operates.
He did admit to being informed within minutes of the firing, so right. he didn't probably know before the firing.
Well, and again, I don't know Chris that well. I don't know if that's truthful or that's not. I mean, I've spoken with Jimmy Nolan on it, and Jimmy said that he was only informed that morning of the firing. So I believe that, because I did not only get that from Jimmy, but I got that from another legislative aide within the board of within the BOL. So it's quite possible that that Chris didn't know either. I don't know. Again, as I said with Mike Cater and the quid pro quo, let there be an investigation, figure this out, and then move forward with an accusation.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Ron, I greatly appreciate you being on here. 30 minutes turned into an hour, but it was a great conversation. Went on here, and like I said before, good luck, and we'll see what's going to happen. This is going to be a really interesting year for everyone.
Stay in touch, and I'll reach out to watch you so I can stay in touch.
Definitely. Ron, thank you again. You have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye.
What's up, Yonkers? It's Anderson. You already know that. So check this out. Ron, thank you for coming on. we have a video of, I forgot her name, the executive director of the Yonkers downtown bid, in chancletas, just t-shirt that didn't look like it fit her. We have video that was sent to us harassing a food vendor at the corner of, I think it was Morris and South Broadway. We'll put that video up, if not tonight, in the morning, so everyone can see that video. And thank you guys for tuning in. And that is it for tonight.